Hello everybody and welcome back to another video for the Bridge Project, where today we're going to be going through the story of the Good Samaritan. So of course we've done quite a few stories so far. We've also done some other videos along the way, as I'm sure, well, you can all see on the channel, but we have done some known stories and we've made our way on to probably one of the most well-known stories of the Good Samaritan. So of course, as always, let's get straight into it. I will interject with some of my thoughts throughout the story, as always, and it's a pretty prudent one, very important for all of us to hear, and so enjoy. The Good Samaritan. A lawyer once approached Jesus and asked him some questions. Of course, Jesus was teaching, he was preaching his ideas and his thoughts on the world, and he was approached by someone who said, "Jesus, or teacher, what must I do to inherit an eternal life?" Jesus replied, "What is written in the law? How do you understand it?" The lawyer replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbour as yourself." And Jesus said, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But the lawyer wanted to justify himself, so he asked, "And who is my neighbour?" And then Jesus followed up with a story. So, this is obviously a little of an introduction for the continuing story of the Good Samaritan, as we're going to see. But just a few things to touch on here. When the person approaching asks to inherit an eternal life, first of all, what does that even mean? Is probably a good question to have in the back of your mind. But I think we all probably get the understanding that it's a good thing to have an eternal life. Let's say would be a good thing. It generally means what can I do to have a life which is so amazing, such that I will live on forever. And maybe that might not be his physical being living on forever, but it might mean that people talk about him forever because of how good of a person he was. This is a way you can view it. Other ways of view it is, of course, can you have an eternal life in heaven or hell, let's say, in quotations, or of course not, if that is something that you might believe. And so it's a question that's basically saying, well, how can I have the best life possible? And Jesus is like, well, look, we've got written law for this. And so the lawyer answers with the phrase, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind." That's the first part of it, and we can kind of touch on that. The way that I view that is, whatever you view as God, that needs to be at the pinnacle of your hierarchy, no matter what. And so if you think that you should be a better person, what that means is that you're aiming directionally towards, well, God, what would be the ideal way to act in any scenario. And so it's saying your heart needs to have that action and love towards it, your soul, whatever you might think that would be, your strength, which is a key one, right, needs to have that direction towards acting as the ideal in every single scenario, and of course your mind, right? So each and every one of those things, they kind of make up your being. So it's basically saying your being needs to be purely in love, which we can probably talk about in another episode, with the ideal. You need to purely be acting towards the ideal. And then it says to love your neighbour as yourself, which is exactly what the story is set up to talk about, as we'll see. And Jesus says, well, this is the story basically for love your neighbour as yourself. So let us continue. There was once a man travelling from Jerusalem to Jericho. It was a very dangerous road, known for thieves and bandits and, well, lots of dangerous things along the way. And as this man travelled, he happened to be a Jew, and robbers attacked him. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him badly, they took everything he owned, and they left him lying beside the road, half dead. So I'm sure we can all imagine this. Some time later, a priest came walking along that same road. And of course, he came across this injured man. He gave him a look, almost out the side of his eye. He saw the injured man, but instead of stopping to help, he crossed to the other side of the road and continued on his way. No doubt he had some things to do. Soon after, a Levite, which is a respected religious man, also came by. Once more, he looked at the injured man, yet he too passed without helping. He just walked alongside. Both of them, of course, with knowledge. They saw the man. Then a Samaritan came along. Now, this is important. The Jews and the Samaritans at this time despised one another. They did not like one another. They had centuries of hostility between them. And if anyone out of these three people had probably the what you might call quote unquote best excuse to stop, it would be the Samaritan. Best excuse not to stop, in fact, it would be the Samaritan. And yet, when he saw the wounded man, he was filled with compassion. He went over to him. He cleaned and dressed his wounds with oil and wine. He lifted him onto his own donkey and walked him to an inn. He stayed and cared for him through the night. The next morning, the Samaritan gave the innkeeper money and said, "Take care of him. If it costs any more than this, I will repay you when I return." And when the story finished, Jesus asked, which one of these three was a neighbour to the man who was attacked? And of course, the lawyer answered, the one who showed him mercy. And as Jesus finished, he said to go and do likewise. Now, of course, it's somewhat of a short story, but nonetheless packs the punch and tells the idea. But it's not exactly just a typical help people story. There's a lot that goes along with it. It's the idea that your neighbour is not just your friend or your family or people you already like or people that is, that literally live next to you. Your neighbour is the person just in front of you in the present moment who might need your help. The priest and Levite almost certainly, as we mentioned, had some reasons for walking past, but they may have been busy, afraid, or thought someone else would help. And this is something very common. But the Samaritan simply saw, someone on the side of the road and thought, I should help them, despite them being someone that you might disagree with. And so it's almost viewing someone as, an individual, as a human. Even if they have things that you disagree with, you should help them, and then you can have debates afterwards of free-flowing conversation so you can see what maybe you disagree on. And that is the way that we should have conversations and communications between one another. So there we go. That is the Good Samaritan. It's a, good story, I would say, very good story. It's pretty much the archetypal version of this type of story, and so good to keep the lessons in mind. Thank you for watching as always, and I will see you in the next one.